Welcome to Softcover Reviews. I'm Ash, and today I'm going to talk about The Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So this is going to start off with a more general summary of the book. I'll put in a timestamp where you can bypass the spoilers and get directly to my thoughts on the book. So let me start off with the general synopsis. So we see Coriolanus Snow, he's 18 and he's in his final year at the academy. He is trying to regain his family's legacy, glory, all that stuff. And he is selected as one of 24 mentors for the 10th Hunger Games. And his tribute is from District 12, or at least it appears she's from District 12. Her name's Lucy Gray Baird. She's from a traveling performance group called the Covey, and she and her family, this troupe, they end up in District 12 the same time as the reaping, and her name gets called, and that's how she ends up Coriolanus's tribute for the Hunger Games. And we see their relationship develop from mentor tribute to something deeper than that. That's like the very basic info you need to know about this book, this upcoming film. Now skip ahead to this time slot, this time. Anything being spoiled. My general thoughts on the book. So this starts at I have my notes here. Our first introduction to Coriolanus is him trying to save face, essentially. His family is poor. Their wealth was built around District 13, and when that fell apart, their wealth went with it. So he, his cousin, Tigress, and their grandmother are essentially trying to appear as they still have their wealth, and they keep people at just enough of a distance to where no one really suspects anything. So Coriolanus sees this mentorship as an opportunity to bring his family's glory back. Lucy Gray and Coriolanus get connected pretty quickly. He is determined to do whatever to get her to win. Gets revealed later on that there is a prize for the mentor who wins, and that's a full ride scholarship to the university. The academy and university don't actually have official names in this book. That's just what they're called. When I first attempted to read this book, listen to this book, because I listened to it on Audible, it just felt very much oh, poor Coriolanus, nobody likes him, he's poor, but he has to pretend he's still rich, and all this other stuff. And it wasn't really, so I ended up dropping it, I'd say about 2 chapters before it really started getting good. And for me, the end of chapter 6 going into chapter 7. So within this point, at the very end of chapter 6 going into chapter 7, one of his classmates, Akron, I think is how you say her name. She manages to get herself killed by her own tribute by teasing the tribute. They have the tributes in a zoo out on display in the Capitol. They get this idea, as far as Coriolanus and his classmates. Well, I guess it was a mix of an idea / realization that they're not going to have any tributes if they're not fed. Coriolanus sneaks some food for Lucy Gray. One of his classmates, Sejanus, who we'll get into in a little bit, he brings a backpack full of sandwiches to feed to the tributes, and was his attempt to connect to his tribute. Capitol citizens start showing up at the zoo. At first they're afraid of the tributes, but then realize that, they're kind of like them. They start bringing food and stuff down. Some of the tributes realize that, if they entertain the Capitol citizens, they'll more likely to get food. Well, Akron takes things too far and puts some food in between the gate, pulls it back, and was just getting a laugh out the crowd and stuff. Her tribute just snaps and gets a weapon, slits her throat, and she ends up bleeding out and dying. So that's how chapter 6 going into chapter 7 goes. A few days later, the remaining mentors, they take their tributes to the arena where they will be battling to the death. and some bombs go off. And they're not really sure how it happened, if they were bombs left from the war or if some rebels snuck in or what the deal is, but more mentors end up getting killed. So by the time you actually get to the actual Hunger Games, there's about 20 or so mentors and tributes left. And then another classmate of Coriolanus, she ends up getting bit by multiple snakes in a lab when Professor Gull, who is like their main teacher at the academy, and she's the head game maker, and she has all these mutated animals and she's doing all these experimentations. And so they're assigned a project, and because she knew they were lying, but she asks both, what was her name? Was it Clemencia? What is her name? Yeah, I think it was Clemencia. So Professor Gull like calls her bluff on it, and she puts their assignment, this paper, into a tank with some snakes, and she told Coriolanus to put his hand in the tank. He does it, and then Clemencia puts her hand in the tank, and that's when she gets attacked because the paper did not have her scent on it, which proved that they were lying about it, she helping out with this paper. So within this paper was like ideas for the Hunger Games, and Professor Gull like loved it. I think this was when the betting comes into play. It was something like that. Let's talk about his friend slash other classmate, Serjanus Plith. So Serjanus is another classmate of Coriolanus, and he's from District 2 originally. His father has money, a lot of wealth and money tied in from the war. So they move from District 2 to the capital, and Serjanus is just like not adapting well to the change. He pretty much despises the Hunger Games, but his father, I think, pulled some strings to have him as a mentor to get him to fit in a little bit better with other like capital students and stuff. It looks good for the dad. Serjanus's tribute is, his name's Marcus, and he actually was a classmate of Serjanus back when they were in District 2. During the bombings, Marcus makes a run for it, and he ends up getting caught, and by the time we get to the Hunger Games, his body is shown out on display for like everyone to see it, and he's like near death at this point. He was beaten, and he does eventually end up dying, and Serjanus is just like disgusted by it, has a meltdown. And then later on, after like the crowds and all that were gone from the stadium, Serjanus sneaks in to try to send Marcus off to the afterlife. There's like this special ritual that people do in District 2 to send off people who have passed on. So Serjanus is in there, he's trying to do that. Professor Gull and like some of the other people who are in charge of like the Hunger Games stuff, they see it, they're trying to edit the feed and make sure that no one can really tell what's going on. And Professor Gull calls Coriolanus at his house, and so that was like, you need to get him out of there, smooth and swift as possible. So Coriolanus goes in there, talks to Serjanus, and they decide that they were going to try to move Marcus's body away from like the arena and all that. That backfires, and other tributes discover that there's another mentor in there, and they go to attack the two of them. And in this attack, one of the other tributes, Bobbin, ends up getting beaten to death by Coriolanus in his attempt at self-defense to get out of the arena. So they get out, we get into like the groove of things for the actual games. So Coriolanus and Lucy Gray do end up winning the 10th Hunger Games, but Dean Highbottom, who was a former friend of Coriolanus's father, he discovers how they were able to cheat and get around certain things. One of these was a handkerchief that was Coriolanus's father's. He didn't realize had his initials on it, his father's initials on it, Lucy Gray's scent on it. That was how she was able to not get bitten by a bunch of snakes that were released in the arena. There was a compact that his mother owned that he filled with rat poison, so Lucy Gray was able to poison a tribute in the arena. She was also, because snakes recognized her scent, she was able to use one of those snakes to kill another tribute in the games. And then, what was the other thing that got him in trouble? Oh, they discovered that he snuck out food from the cafeteria to feed Lucy Gray. So at this point, the dean was like, okay, here's your options. If you don't want to face being disgraced and like publicly outed for all this, you can go and join the Peacekeepers. Those are his options. So he gets expelled from the expelled from the academy, and is on a hovercraft, I guess. He ends up going to District 12 to serve his 20-year, I guess, sentence in a way, to be a peacekeeper. So this is why in the trailer, which that was really the reason why I wanted to read the book, because I'm like, why does he look like Slim Shady in the trailer? That's why he ends up becoming a peacekeeper. So in this, Coriolanus is just like hit rock bottom, so he thinks, and he ends up being in District 12, which he chose subconsciously to be in this district to serve out his time there. And he's there for a few weeks. Completely unexpectedly, Serjanus pops up and was like, oh, like, is this bunk taken? And so Serjanus, he's like, Coriolanus is super happy to see him. He's like shook, like, why are you here? He just like wasn't vibing with stuff in the Capitol. He knew there was something weird going on with Coriolanus and stuff. And Coriolanus had asked him like what was going on with the Hunger Games. Did like anybody even like remember it? What was going on? And Serjanus was like, yeah, so about that. They pretty much just like erased everything about the 10th Hunger Games. So it is what it is. There was some relief from Coriolanus in a way, but then the kicker comes is that Serjanus was like, his father paid to fix like 2 buildings for the academy in order to barter a deal really with the academy for Coriolanus and Serjanus to graduate from high school. In the case of Coriolanus, he also got to keep his honors, so he finished high school with honors. So within this, Coriolanus thought that he was like done for, but now he has like a new leaf on life. We also, at this point, had no idea like what happened with Lucy Gray, other than that, yeah, she won the Hunger Games, but Coriolanus was concerned if she was like killed because of the cheating stuff, like what was going on. Until Serjanus was like, yeah, when they erased the Hunger Games, like, yeah, Lucy did win, but he just assumed that she was sent back to 12. And so they figure, hey, wait a minute, we're in 12. So like, maybe we should try to find her. And Coriolanus is like, man, like, how do we even do that? So in their room, they have 2 other roommates, that are peacekeepers also. And so one of them mentions that Saturday nights at the Hob, they have a group of performers. And so they're supposed to have some girl back, and they piece together that, yeah, that's Lucy Gray. So she connects back with the Covey with them during this whole time. So yeah, things are good at first. Coriolanus does end up meeting up with Lucy Gray and asking her like what happened and how she was doing. She had no idea how he was doing. They end up meeting the other members of the Covey. They go like on this trip to the lake, and they have a good time. Things were good until they weren't. So you can see the cracks forming and just like how far up Coriolanus is up the Capitol's ass at this point. I think the big thing that starts triggering, like, far as where your loyalty lies, was when they are both scheduled, as far as Coriolanus and Serjanus, to attend a hanging. And so this is a rebel supporter, rebel member, and he was caught doing treasonous acts. So there they go, and this is actually like how this whole situation inspires the whole Hanging Tree song that I think it was like in the first and second like Hunger Game books. Katniss was singing and she talks about the song. So Coriolanus is really disturbed by the situation, not so much because of the rebel being hung, but because of the Mockingjays singing his like last dying words and how like eerie and jarring it was. So that just didn't sit right with him. He wants all the birds dead. So he brings this up to his commander, and he reaches out to the Capitol about it. And they end up having one of the professors, or one of the, I forget if she was a professor, doctor, scientist who was actually in charge of the whole Mockingjay program, to come down and do like some studying and research on how the Mockingjays were able to like reproduce and survive and all that other stuff. In this, she teaches Coriolanus how to program the birds so you can have them catch certain phrases to start recording and stop recording. So he uses this to his advantage. Later on, when he realizes that Serjanus is starting to talk with some locals and who might be trying to be part of like the rebellion and stuff. So Coriolanus says to Serjanus, like, you're like my brother. If you're having like anything on your mind, like, you could talk to me about it. So at that point, Serjanus doesn't take the bait, but a few hours go by, and Coriolanus knows Serjanus is like a very emotional, impulsive person. So eventually he cracks and spills to Coriolanus everything that's going on, the plot to buy guns and work with some of the rebels to rescue the girlfriend of the rebel member who was hung because she had been taken away by the peacekeepers during the hanging. So they're trying to break into the base and like get her out. Coriolanus, the opportunist scammer that he is, records this confession, and when the birds are sent back to the Capitol, he's hoping that the message gets relayed back to Professor Gull. And at first we don't know what happens, but that's like going on in the background. So in the meantime, things go left at this performance at the Hob with the Covey. They're on stage performing and stuff. The guys are all there watching the performance, and Serjanus sneaks out during the middle of one of the performances. Coriolanus gives him a few seconds, and then he goes to follow. And in this, he discovers that in the warehouse where the Covey usually have like their, where they sit before and after the show to like get ready and all that other stuff, there's a meeting with the rebels. Coriolanus is watching, but he hasn't confronted anybody yet. And then Lucy Gray, who was singing on stage, leaves the stage and sneaks around to the warehouse to see what's going on. She just sees Coriolanus there and talks all loud. She's like, "Hey, I saw that you left the show. I want to see what's going on." And at the same time she does all this, realizes that, oh, you're spying, and I just blew the cover. And then just things get crazy. The mayor's daughter, Mayfield, I think is her name, she's caught up in all of this. Lucy Gray's ex, who was a part of the Covey, he ends up getting kicked out and ends up like running around town with like Mayfield, and they're like new lovers or whatever. They both get killed. Coriolanus shoots Mayfield to protect Lucy Gray, and Billy, the ex-lover of Lucy Gray, also ends up getting killed. And like, yeah, so they're both dead. And even though no one really cared too much about Billy's death, one of the rebel guys is like, someone's going to have to pay for this in regards to the mayor's daughter. They'll try to make a run for it and not get caught. But of course, after the show, one of the Covey members ends up being the first one to enter like the break room area and discovers the mayor's daughter dead, along with Billy. And then the peacekeepers just mostly shrug the whole thing off as like infighting between the rebels. The mayor's daughter had this reputation of being a brat, and a lot of them just were like, it's what she gets for running around with sketchy people. But the mayor is convinced that Lucy Gray has something to do with it because he knew that his daughter and Lucy Gray had beef. And I guess he's just like, from what Lucy Gray was saying in the book, was that he's like staking out the Covey's house, and she's afraid that he's going to have her killed or something. So she tells Coriolanus that she's ready to pack up things and like leave town and head north. So Coriolanus is like paranoid about his prints being found on the gun. So things just get super wild from then on. So there's all this stuff going on in the background. You have Coriolanus applying for the officer position, and then you have these murders of the mayor's daughter and of Billy. So in the scramble of all this stuff, word gets to the base that Sturjanus has been accused of treason, that Professor Gall received the Mockingjay that Coriolanus recorded Sturjanus's confession on, and Sturjanus is sentenced to death for it. So now they attend a second hanging. He gets the next, I think it's like a few hours later, he's hung. So you have all that going on, and Coriolanus is sad about it to an extent, but he's more focused on the issue with the gun and his fingerprints being on it. Learns that he's been accepted to the officer program, and yeah, because he graduated with honors and stuff, he's highly educated compared to a lot of the other people who have like trying out for this position. He gets accepted, and he's supposed to leave the next morning, like in 2 days' time, something like that. So he's paranoid about it, and he decides to like run away with Lucy Gray. So they agree the next day to take off. He meets her at the hanging tree that she wrote like the song about, and they head north back towards where the lake and all that other stuff was. This sours very quickly because they have a conversation. Coriolanus admits that he killed 3 people, and Lucy Gray's like, who's the third? I know of the mayor's daughter and of Bobbin, tribute, who attacked him during the Hunger Games. Lucy Gray puts together that Sturjanus was the third person killed by Coriolanus. And once I think she realizes that Coriolanus is not only a snitch, but if he's willing to have his best friend killed, then like what does that mean for her? So she makes up an excuse of checking out the Katniss potatoes to see if they're ready to be harvested and eaten. And Coriolanus lets her go, and then some time passes, and he realizes, wait a minute, I've been ditched. I'm gonna go find her. So he goes. He takes one of the guns with him as protection. It's this like storm of emotions. He's angry. He's saddened by it. He feels betrayed. All this other stuff. So this is the last we see of Lucy Gray. She just takes off. She did set a trap with a snake that to bite Coriolanus, but it wasn't venomous, which he discovers after he goes back in town, goes to the base. He goes to like the clinic there and gets treated for his bite, but it sounded like more of just him being like dehydrated and just like overheated because the snake itself wasn't venomous. So he was good, and he just continues his plans on becoming an officer. When it comes to Lucy Gray and us not seeing her again or getting any closure on what happened to her, I did read a comment on Goodreads where they suggested that perhaps she ended up being Katniss's father's mother. So Lucy Gray would have been Katniss's grandmother, which I think is interesting. I like that take because it kind of connects everything like 360. But I think more likely because of Lucy Gray's nature and how she was just like nomadic. She was an orphan and ended up joining the Covey and just traveled around with them, that she just most likely ended up in a different district and probably settled down there maybe with somebody. But I think she just most likely just kind of led a normal life and ended up dying. I mean, we don't really get any... Well, I mean, I guess she could have outlived Snow, but I think she just kind of faded into obscurity because by the time we get to the timeline of Katniss, at some point the districts get closed off. Right now there's free travel between them, but at some point she had to have either been in the wilderness somewhere or stuck in one of those districts. It might have been 12, but I don't know. We don't know. So going back to Coriolanus. So he is on this hovercraft, he's thinking to go to District 2 and start his officer training because he accepted that. And he never told them that he was leaving to run off with Lucy Gray or anything. So as far as they know, he was just saying his goodbyes and that was it. He gets on the craft and takes a nap and realizes when he wakes up, he's at the Capitol. And he's like, there's some mistake. I'm supposed to be back in District 2. Did I miss my stop or something? And they're like, no, we were ordered to send you here. And actually, you need to meet with Professor Gull. So he meets up with her. She's like, oh, hey, friend. Like, how was it? How was your, like, summer vacation with the Peacekeepers? And Coriolanus is just like, what are you talking? What? Like, what is going on? He's just, like, completely confused by the whole thing. And she's just like, yeah, so about Sir Janus, like, that was unfortunate, but you did the right thing for your country. And actually, I want you to be my protege and help with fleshing out ideas for the Hunger Games. And so she tells him about how she pretty much wiped everything from the 10th Hunger Games, which was on purpose. Coriolanus was suspecting that because when he was leaving the Capitol to go to District 12, he noticed that following day, after the Hunger Games, there was just like no talk about it. It was like it never happened. It was in fact Professor Gull who did all that. She had his stuff for the Peacekeepers, so he was given an honorable discharge, and so now he can start university in the fall. Everything's back in like good standing. So in this role, he ends up creating a lot of the aspects that we see in the Hunger Games by the time it gets to Katniss. And so there's one final loose end with Dean Highbottom. So he ends up resigning from his position. He knows that Coriolanus is back, and Coriolanus at this point, he's just like radiant. He's on top. Snailland's on top. He connected back with the Pliffs, and they have no idea that Coriolanus essentially killed their son. So because they have that void, and they think that Coriolanus was just like Sir Janus's best friend, he did everything to look out for him and all this other stuff, they take him in as their son. And they knew that Coriolanus's parents have passed. So they're like, you know, we're missing a son, you're missing your parents, let's just like, we can't officially adopt you because you're a grown-ass man, but we're going to take you in as a son. And all the finances, because there was some taxes owed on the penthouse, Tigress was panicking about how they were supposed to handle that. She didn't want Coriolanus to be concerned with it, but she did bring up that that was an issue, and Coriolanus's plan was to have his money from the Peacekeepers go back to Tigress and his grandmother. But because everything that's happened, now the Pliffs are paying for everything. He has an allowance, and anything he wants, he gets. And so Dean Highbottom, I don't know if he knew he was on the shit list, but he expected Coriolanus to have some type of confrontation with him. So the dean, or I guess former dean at this point, because he was in that transition of like being in that role, he just like had it with the Hunger Games. So Coriolanus is just like, bro, what is your problem? So at this point we learn that, I think his name was Cascus Highbottom, and I forget what Coriolanus' father's name was, but it was Highbottom who created the Hunger Games. They had a project under Professor Gull when they were students. He just kind of pitched this idea. It was just like, whatever, it's supposed to be a joke thing. But Coriolanus' father loved it, and he turned it in to Professor Gull without Highbottom's permission, and that's why they had their falling out. And he just has like this deep regret and guilt about the whole thing. And Coriolanus is kind of upset by that, but it's more of wanting revenge because they've had this beef and this grudge for a while, and Highbottom was trying to punish Coriolanus, like rightfully so, for like cheating in the Hunger Games and all that, and he didn't even want the Hunger Games to happen. And I'm sure at this point Highbottom realized that the Hunger Games are not only going to be continuing on, but they're going to be worse. So he's just like over it, and Coriolanus is over it. And in his last act that we see in the book, Coriolanus takes the morphine bottle that he knows that Highbottom is like addicted to, puts a small amount of rat poison in it, and Dean Highbottom ends up ingesting this and dying. So that's how the book ends. Coriolanus is just irredeemable, and at this point he's just set on his path to absolute villainy. I couldn't finish this book fast enough. By the time we got to like the 70% point, I was kind of feeling like, okay, it's a little sluggish, a little bit slow, but everything was designed that way on purpose. There's a lot of like a slow burn. And then once like it caught fire, pun intended, it really caught fire. And I just was like, I had it on 2 times speed at first because I was just like trying to consume everything all at once. And then I had to put it back to, I had it at 1.5. And then I had it at like 1.75 or like 1.7 speed. That was like just enough to where I could like get everything absorbed and like still understand what was going on. So I loved it. Coriolanus is just absolute garbage. And we know that from the mainline story, of course, but this really just showed how devious and conniving and opportunist and just parasitic this man is. And when I was reading the main trilogy, when we get to the point where Katniss meets President Snow, like the first time in person, you get a feeling of dread, and like, Katniss just feels awful about it. She wants to run as far away from him as possible. And I didn't really like understand those feelings from her until this book, because in his youth, a lot of it I think was glossed over because he's like handsome. You see him at the end there, he's got his curls and his hair is like all grown back and stuff, and so he's got his looks to soften the blow of his manipulation and self-servingness. So he's like a terrifying person because he knows how to say the right things at this right time. And even though he's not really that charming, people just like are really attracted to him, and he's able to give off this aura of power and intelligence and control and just like redeemable qualities. But he's like a parasite, and he doesn't use these things for good. So it's not like this book, in my opinion, glorifies any of that. It just showcases like this, you thought he was bad when he was old man, like he's kind of always been awful. So it's not set for you to be rooting for him. If anything, for me, I found it entertaining. It's just like, okay, how much more is he going to be able to get away with? How can he get himself out of the situation? And he just keeps doing it. And then something else would happen, and then he manages to get out of that. So you just are like waiting for his comeuppings, and it doesn't really happen for a long time. This book for me is easily 5-star read. I highly recommend it if you've read or watched the previous like trilogy. I think I gave the first Hunger Games book a 5-star, and then the other 2 I gave 4 stars. Like the first one is still my favorite. Then I would say this one would be my second favorite of the series. It was really interesting to see the world building of Pan Am, the differences in technology, the how these families were able to get their wealth. The writing was really addicting, and even like the smallest like side character, you were able to quickly get like what their stick was and the information that you needed out of them. It's just a phenomenal book. I can't wait to see how it gets translated into film. And yeah, if you've read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. See you next time. Bye.